Hello everybody, Sam from RoadTrailRun. Today we're going to take a look at the Nike Air Zoom Alphafly Next %2. It released in limited quantities mid-June. Expect to see more soon. It is $275. Wow. So it is an update to the original Alphafly, and I'm going to be comparing here in the review as there are quite a few significant changes. First and foremost, we now go to an 7 to 8 millimeter drop. I measure about 7. It's probably closer to 8 from 4. We also see a wider base. The original had a narrower base. I measure 5 millimeters more at the widest at the heel and 5 millimeters more at the forefoot. We also get a very significantly different execution of the heel collar here, as now we are sort of canted forward. You can see here with a much higher collar setup and quite a bit more padding on the inside. We just had that little blue strip before. So wider heel base, more substantial rear heel counter, higher drop. To me, this says that the shoe is going to run more flowy. The original, for me, required quite a bit of vertical knee lift, and actually I was at the finish line of Boston just before the finish the last 2 years, and it was really noticeable that those in the Alphafly really needed good high knee lift, whereas those in the Vaporfly, which is still up till now, I haven't tried these yet, still my favorite, had more of a rolling motion. So with the higher drop, more stable heel, I expect I'm going to find a more rolling motion here. Now also you can see that the foot now sits deeper down into the midsole sidewalls, and we have a more contoured sock liner than before. If you look over here, you can see over here we sat very much flat on the sock liner, and the walls were not nearly as high. This is particularly noticeable at the heel, where we really sit down right about into here. We have more arch support from the sock liner. Now, in terms of the Zoom X platform here, so I measure about 40 millimeters at the heel and 32, 33 at the fore. Whereas over here we were higher, even though it doesn't appear it. Also of note, let me try to get these so we can see it. You can see there's a little strip of Zoom X below the AirPod, whereas before we just had the outsole. In version 1, we had 5 or 6 millimeters of rubber, whereas we have 2 millimeters of rubber here, but it's also chamfered or angled, which I think will also help the wear. Overall distance between the bottom of the Air Zoom and the ground is about the same. So Nike also did some very interesting things here with the outsole. Before, we had this kind of thick, wavy rubber. Grip was decent, but not great. Now we have a thinner outsole, 2 millimeters thick, with mini lugs, if you will. You can also see that the cavity here is longer than in version 1, and we have holes punched through the outsole. This, I think, will allow the foot to depress further kind of into the foam. It may give less noise on the road. We're going to find that out. At the heel, as I said, we sit on a wider platform here, 5 millimeters wider here, 5 millimeters, and then in version 1. And I measure about the same up front, 5 millimeters wider at the widest point. You can also see that they've carved out more of the midsole here. They've exposed the plate, whereas here we had foam. And all of these things, when we take into account the higher midsole sidewalls, the wider platform, were to keep the weight in control because our version 2 here weighs, in my US 8.5, it weighs 7.76 ounces, 221 grams, US 8.5. My version 1 over here weighed about half an ounce less at 207 grams, 7.2 ounces, US 8.5. So we have about a 14 gram weight gain. Not much, still not much for this gigantic stack shoe. Of course, let's take a look at the upper here. As you can see, just visually here, you can see how here we have sort of a pliable, collapsing upper. Here, it completely stands up on its own. Fits very nicely. Actually, the fit is quite similar. I'm going to give you comments from the run on how it actually fits. But this is definitely a more airy kind of atom knit here with more kind of inherent structure, although there isn't really anything completely different. It's a little denser, maybe a little thicker, and definitely has more inherent structure. A really unusual feature here, the eye stay that holds the laces. It's very hard to see, but the only place a lace is exposed, if you will, in the shoe is right at final lace up. The rest of the lacing goes through this kind of molded plastic piece here with no laces touching the foot, whereas over here our laces were more conventional. They went through and were over the foot. We also see more padding on the tongue, which is kind of a fly knit kind of material. You can see the ridges, whereas here we had nothing. And why? Well, we've got that narrower kind of opening, but also the stretch knit here is definitely thicker and not quite as stretchy as the knit in version 1, and I'll show you that. You can see this is a much stretchier, lighter kind of knit. Also, the heel counter, as you can see, is now canted forward. I think this also contributes to what will be, I think, a more forward motion, less of a low drop feel that I felt here. I really felt that this was a 4mm drop shoe, and if I couldn't get up on my midfoot, forefoot, and most of us probably can't towards the end of a marathon, to bounce it up, I struggled on longer distances. I expect here we're going to be able to cant forward more. We're more secure, more stable, more oriented forward. In terms of the laces, about the same kind of thing. A little more, I would say, ridges on the new version. So I've tried them on. Lace up is super good. I think they fit about the same for me. There may be a bit more kind of toe box, inherent toe box height, but very, very similar in fit, with the most notable thing, the much more secure, if you will, forward kind of moving heel hold. So I'm going to take them out for a run now in Portsmouth. I'm going to give you my first run impressions. We're going to have a full multi-tester review real soon at RoadTrailRun, but Nike's premier road racing shoe, along with the Vaporfly, gets the second edition. Let's see how they run. So I took a short A/B run, one on each foot. You can clearly see, even though they feel about the same, you see my bunion over here on the older version, and over here there's clearly more volume, maybe a bit more width in the toe box. I think part of it comes, the good hold, which is similar, really comes from that little bit stiffer atom knit. Now there's also clearly more medial support in our version 2. We have that better sock liner. Both sock liners are glued in, but as you can see here, the V2 has more contouring under the arch, more arch support, while the V1's is flatter and a bit thinner. We have the wider platform, 5mm wider platform, just feels much more stable. I'm not pronating quite as much in the number 2 as in the 1. And the rear hold is really much more solid here. A bit high, so maybe those ankle or those no-show socks might not work. In terms of the difference in ride, one short run in, well, it feels to me like the extra 4 millimeters drop is concentrated near the front, because I feel much more of a rolling sensation forward than in version 1, where I sort of have to pop more vertically, almost at slower paces, almost like a scuffing feeling, whereas here there's definitely more forward roll. I'd also say I think the air unit and plate, the noise business is somewhat reduced in number 2. So now I'm going to take number 2 out for a solid run, and I'll tell you how that works out. Really looking forward to it. But so far, better overall hold, especially at the rear. Definitely more stability from the wider platform. And I think a slightly more voluminous toe box, but held about the same because of the difference in the atom knit. So I put the full pair of Alphafly 2s on, ran out to Newcastle, 5-miler, 8:09 pace, with 2 pickups in the middle, and there you can see the former U.S. Naval Prison and one of our iconic tugboats. Here's how it all worked out. A little bit more about the fit. Superb here, very secure. I would not call this a cushy upper. The mesh is a little kind of not dense, but a little kind of firm. The filaments, I think, are firm, but it's very comfortable without being kind of soft and easy on the foot, and it's very secure. I also really noticed that new, more molded sock liner instead of the flat. Really supports the arch. I don't feel like I'm kind of collapsing, pronating as much as in the first version. Of course, I laced them up and it's been all good. I haven't even thought about redoing. So the lace up through these little plastic pieces on that strip, excellent. The laces hold well with their little nubbies. So now I'm going to keep going. That's actually the oldest house in New Hampshire, 1647, which is pretty darn good for around here. So we're at the mouth of Portsmouth Harbor out in Newcastle. The Atlantic's just beyond me. So let's talk a little bit about the ride. I'm about 3 miles in. I did a pickup on a Strava segment. We'll see how that turned out. My record on that segment, I think, is in the Tempo Next %. And the Alphafly reminds me a lot of the Tempo Next % in the sense that this new outrigger configuration, the 5mm wide base, and the upper hold gives me a real solid landing, and I tend to heel strike at slower paces. Even at slower paces, when I started out, 9-minute pace, they felt stable and good. And I think that also leads, because I'm higher up, the drop is now 8mm, leads me forward much easier than in the earlier version, where I found I really had to land right in here or else the heel felt low. There's something else to note here. Not sure exactly what it is, what's causing it, but I think the longer cavity, the perforations in the thinner outsole lead to a nice final roll, not the kind of long roll of the Vaporfly, but a final, almost like the speed roll from Saucony. So instead of having to kind of rebound vertically, I can land and roll a bit more off the front. Again, the drop, I think, is playing a role in that. Okay, I'm back for my 5-mile run, kind of the loop I like to do out to Newcastle. And I am super pleased with this Alphafly 2. So during the run, I had my 3rd fastest time on about a little less than a mile segment. That's a flat straightaway. Actually was into the wind today, and it tied the 2nd fastest. And my most fastest, I think, is a little suspect, and I'm not sure the Vivo Active was quite that accurate that day, but it doesn't matter. This is a very, very steady, fast shoe. I say steady because there are no kind of awkward elements in it anymore for me. I get really good rebound from the air unit, but I also get a little bit of roll off the front. And as I said earlier, reminds me a little bit of the speed roll from Saucony. I don't remember that at all, and even in my short AB run, I didn't have that. The landing is super stable. You can feel it's broader. You can feel yourself moving forward. It's just very easy to maintain pace here. The only time they felt a teeny bit awkward was on a couple short, steep downhills. I don't think I was leaning forward fast enough. I think if you land and you don't really kind of get forward, they can feel a bit awkward, but not really unstable. Upper hold was superb every step of the way. Never thought about the laces. They really grip in the little eyelets super well. So where does the Alphafly 2 sit these days? Well, number one, version 1 wouldn't have been a marathon shoe for me. Too low at the heel, couldn't quite get my knees drive. This would definitely be a marathon shoe, definitely a half shoe. It's going to be interesting to see what Nike does about the Vaporfly. My suspicion, with no information, is that they'll make that a lighter, kind of more intermediate shoe, maybe even lighter than what we have now. And this is kind of your flagship marathon shoe. It certainly is a shoe that's more accessible to all, from elite to old guys like me. I averaged 8:09 pace with that pickup and some slower first mile, so I was moving along well. I expect to run sub 140 this year if all goes well. I'm 65, so it doesn't get any easier, but it was 5 years ago or so that I had those fast times on this particular segment, so I'm optimistic given the performance of this shoe. So what does it compare to? Well, it reminded me a lot of the Tempo Next Percent, that's for sure. It is springier, kind of more friendly, and that's kind of the Nike theme, than the Adios Pro 2. I haven't tried the 3. Much easier to roll forward for folks that aren't always right up on the forefoot. It's not quite as soft and bouncy and kind of overly friendly as the RC Elite 2 from New Balance. The Puma FAST-R is a close comparison, but with a key difference. The Puma has a very stable rear heel, also an excellent upper, but its implementation of the plate I find harder to get past, really forces you to get more forward than this shoe does. So several of us have the Alphafly. Nike was kind enough to send them to us. We're going to have a full written multi-tester review real soon at RoadTrailRun.com. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great run.